Her head open, her body wiped clean, her night clothes changed. Soaked fabric she supposedly never wore in the Barbie nightgown. Trauma hidden beneath layers meant to distract. They said she wet the bed, but the stains told a different story. The stains told a story of panic, of someone trying to undo what couldn't be undone. JonBenet Ramsey didn't just die. She was redressed, rearranged beneath the lie. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the intersections of blood and urine in the JonBenet Ramsey case, a forensic overview. Stay tuned. Yo, welcome back. Shout out to you guys. Want to jump in. So we're going to be talking about sort of the intersection of the blood, some of the blood and the urine in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Now, if you were with me last time when we were talking about Patsy and the possibility of the redressing behavior of JonBenet Ramsey, there were some things that I could not talk about yet. I want to talk about some of those things. I want to reveal a little bit more of those things. And I spent like 3 days studying this stuff, trying to understand more about it. And so, like I said, I'm going to be presenting that this week. And so the introduction says, what began as a focused inquiry into the detection of urine on items recovered from the JonBenet Ramsey crime scene quickly expanded into a broader forensic analysis. The 1997 and 1998 Colorado Bureau of Investigations CBI reports reveal not only the presence of, let me get this word right, creatinine. I heard it different. Somebody said it different. I'm thinking creatine because whatever. But anyways, let me try it again. Creatinine. Anyways, help me in the chat. How would you say it? And go, you can go as far as sorry. You can go as far as like spelling it out. Creatinine or something like that. I think it's creatinine. When I first saw the word, I was saying, because I'm so used to hearing creatine, I kept seeing creatine, and it's not. It's creatinine, creatinine, something like that. I'm sorry. Anyways, I don't know. I don't know why I got sidetracked off of that. Anyways, the presence of creatinine, a chemical marker for urine, but also patterns of blood presence across several key exhibits when examined together. I'm just thinking about creatinine. Anyways, when examined together, these substances point toward a possible sequence of events involving trauma, incontinence, and post-event staging. Understanding how and where these fluids were located creates a framework for analyzing inconsistencies in parental testimony and reconstructing a more plausible sequence of actions taken on the night of JonBenet's death. Before I get started, though, I want to send a huge shout out to Eve of West. Thank you so much, Eve, for supporting the channel. Thank you for being consistently showing up in the comments with theories and encouragement. Thank you so much. Boom. Got to give you a hug. I appreciate you. Much love to Eve. Love you guys for the support and the encouragement. I really do. Hope you enjoy this next video. And so again, you remember last time we were talking about the redressing and the complications and the things that go into redressing JonBenet. And we talked a little bit about the blood and the urine and stuff like that. We talked about, I think some of the biggest things were the DNA. And we're aware, if you've been following my investigation, we are already well aware of what the forensic reports say. But as somebody mentioned, it's like you're peeling back each layer and you're looking more critically at what somebody is saying, and you're matching it against the information, because it's like, last week was crazy, because we went through the Megyn Kelly interview and we just broke it down. I thought it was really just going to take like one or two episodes, but it took me like all week to break that down. And the nuggets that we found were just mind blowing in that analysis. The sheer man, what's the word? Denial and delusion that came through in that interview, and the blame shifting that came through in that interview was crazy. It was wild. So we're peeling back some of those narratives as we continue to move forward. Um, and so let's dive right in. Understanding creatinine and its forensic use. When the CBI reports indicated the presence of creatinine, let me say it like that. I want to say I feel comfortable. I like creatinine. If I'm wrong, then tell me, whatever. A substance found in urine, if I can remember how I said it, creatinine. A substance found in urine. It meant presumptive serological testing, and that's like blood testing. I think serological is blood testing. Revealed the likelihood of urine on several pieces of evidence. Rather than explicitly using the term urine, labs often use the chemical marker creatinine because it is scientifically precise and routinely present in human urine. The language is, as I understand it, the language is also legally cautious, particularly when confirmatory tests may not have been performed. Thus, when creatinine is detected, it strongly implies that urine contamination occurred at those specific locations. Exhibits marking what was tested. So you have each exhibit, and this is coming from the CBI report. Maybe I should. Maybe I should. Now, when I'm talking about the forensic reports, I just want you to know this is one of them that I'm talking about. This is one of the reports that I'm talking about, okay? Um, Colorado, and I know you guys trust me, but I just want to show. See, Colorado Bureau of Investigations laboratory report, lab case number, all that, blah, 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 blah. And this is submitted on January 1st, January 8th of 1998, okay? It was submitted on January 8th of 1998, and they even have the date completed, April 1st of 1998, okay? So here are some of the things when we talk about the shirts, the pants, the blanket, the nightgown, the comforter, sheet, towel, vest, sweatshirt, blanket, toilet tissue, pants, blood samples from Colin Crowell, Kevin Rayburn, Lucas Budman, probably people who are supposed to be looked at as, as John and Patsy are telling us that the police they didn't look at anybody else. They didn't look at anybody else. They just us. They just focused on us. And we wouldn't have minded if they would have looked at somebody else. But they hone in this and they would accept help. I don't know about you, but I've never heard of Colin Crowell near any part of the investigation. But here it is in the forensic report. Kevin Rayburn, never heard of him. Maybe you have. Lucas Budman, never heard of him either. Maybe you have. But it looks like not only were they looking at them as suspects, but they were testing their DNA with this stuff, trying to check. You got the Barbie doll, you got the letter, you got the breeze, you got the cigarettes, so on and so forth. But when we get into the testing, a substance, you got presumptive, and this is what I'm talking about right here. Presumptive examinations conducted on the blood samples from L. Budman, blah, 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 blah. Presence of typo. I'm sorry, I need to start here. I see. Presumptive serological analysis indicated the presence of creatinine, as you can see right here up top, a substance found in urine, and the following exhibits: number 5C, number 6A and B, number 16 ACE, H, IJKLOR, 17 IJM, 18 DRT, 19 ABDEF, 20 BCDF, 173 C257B. Huh? That's in there. Because I got it in my notes, but I'm just showing you here because I want to pull it directly from the report. So there's no misunderstanding. right? Because this ain't me. Look at this right here. Presumptive serological analysis indicated the presence of urobilinogen, a substance found in fecal matter. Listen to me. In the following exhibit, number 18U. I think that's it. Okay. And this is an earlier report, and I had it up. This is on 12/30/1996, okay? This is CBI's lab report from 12/30/1996, and this is the report when John and Patsy talk about they knew that they weren't guilty from the beginning, but the police didn't want to release it. This is one of the reports that they sent to the CBI for serological evidence. This is not the DNA report. This is the forensics. So, anyways, this was submitted on 12/30 of 1996 and returned on or completed January 9th of 1997. You're looking at number 5, the shirt, the long underwear bottoms, the underwear, the assault kit, and all such as that's in there, the piece of tape, the white blanket, the nightgown, the comforter. Now, as we saw, I think in the last video, when we were talking about Patsy and the redressing behavior and all such as that, they said CBI number 17 in the DNA. And I can, I already have it pulled up. If I remember correctly. Yeah, I already have it pulled up. CBI number 17. Okay. So when we jump back over and we look at this, this is on, that's why they say that, because this is on the CBI, Colorado Bureau of Investigations report, CBI number 17. We're on the same page. CBI number 17 right there. You got 18, the comforter, the sheet, the black comforter, sheet again, golf club, sheet, and we got some hair and blood samples from John and Melinda and John Andrew, Melinda, John, Bennett, John. We have Patsy, Burke, John Fernie, Priscilla White, Jeff Ramsey, Mervyn Pugh, Linda Hoffman Pugh. We got some blood samples from these people, and it's telling you and this is another thing that I wanted you guys to see, because I haven't covered this yet, but I saw it. Serological examinations conducted on blood samples. That's blood testing on blood samples from JonBenet Ramsey. Serological examinations is talking about blood testing from JonBenet Ramsey, exhibits number 14A and 14B. So JonBenet 14A and 14B, blood samples, just plain blood samples right here. So when we're analyzing her blood samples, disclose the presence of blood group A, secretor status inconclusive. So that might happen when somebody's dead. That might happen that you can't find the secretor status. And when we talk about the secretor status, as I understand it, and I can't remember everything, but it's like being able to test and find your blood through like, or your DNA through things like your urine, your poop, your saliva, being able to test in that. That's inconclusive, and that will happen when people are dead for sure. John Andrew, group type A, blood group A. Melinda, group type A. John Ramsey, group type O. Patsy Ramsey, group type A. She is a secretor, so the meaning that you can see it coming through her saliva, you can see it coming through her poop and stuff like that. John also is a secretor. Melinda is a secretor. You can see it coming through. John Andrew is a secretor. Examinations conducted on blood samples from Burke Ramsey, exhibits 36B1 and 36B2. Hair and blood standards from Burke Ramsey, right here. Okay. Group type A, secretor status inconclusive. Why would your secretor status be inconclusive? And I don't know much about this on the DNA testing, so I don't want to get caught up in a bunch of made up stuff. Okay, so from what I know, I did trying to do a little bit of research on secretor status. So from what I know, the first question would be asking about what is secretor status. So secretor status refers to whether a person secretes blood type antigens A, B, AB, or O into bodily fluids like saliva, mucus, or tears. The trait is determined by the FUT2 gene or FUT2 gene, which produces an enzyme called fucosyl transferase 2. Yeah, it's a long word. This enzyme adds specifics, so if you're a medical professional, then you know what I'm saying. Um, this enzyme adds specific sugar molecules to proteins, enabling the presence of blood type antigens and bodily secretions. Secretors are individuals with a functioning FUT2 gene who have blood type antigens in their bodily fluids. Okay. And so I just kind of want to, you know what? Actually, I will. Um, just so you know, non-secretors, individuals with a non-functioning FUT2 gene who do not have these antigens in their bodily fluids. That's these individuals. So approximately 80% of people are secretors, while the remaining 20% are non-secretors. So when we look at JonBenet, she's dead, she's deceased. Why does she have an inconclusive secretor status? And that would be here. Why does she have an inconclusive secretor status? So when you're looking at something like post-mortem challenges, decomposition of the body fluids, you might have that. So after death, bodily fluids like saliva and mucus begin to break down. This decomposition can hinder the detection. And I'm kind of using the help of AI. I just kind of pour things in there. I kind of look things up and I try to use AI to kind of bring it all together to make it make sense. And I ask different questions about different things and it kind of brings it together. So this decomposition can hinder the detection of blood type antigens. For example, if you have JonBenet and she's been deceased for several hours before sample collection, the degradation of her saliva could have made it difficult to determine her secretor status. You have sample degradation. The quality of biological samples deteriorates over time after death, which can impede accurate testing. For example, if you have JonBenet's body was in a warm environment, the increased temperature could have accelerated the degradation of her bodily fluids, making it harder to detect blood type antigens. So JonBenet was supposed to be in a cold environment. She was supposed to be in an environment in the basement. The temperatures, I think, were believed between 6 degrees and 24 degrees Fahrenheit on December 26th or on December 25 and December 26th of 1996. I think they were in that range. So JonBenet, if that window had been busted open and not fixed, JonBenet would have possibly been in temperatures that kind of reflected, if not that cold, if not 6 degrees to 24 degrees Fahrenheit, then it would have been somewhere around there. It definitely wouldn't have been summertime, right? So we have a problem there because it would have been cold, but the degradation comes in warm environments. Okay. So environmental factors, conditions, it could be because the inconclusiveness could come from environmental factors. Conditions such as temperatures and humidity can affect the preservation of the body. For example, if the basement where JonBenet was found, like we just said, was warm and humid, these conditions could have contributed to the rapid breakdown of her bodily fluids, complicating the determination of the secretor status. Now, when we think about the secretor status of a living individual, right? And we're going to just use JonBenet as an example, okay? So you could have something like number one, weak secretor status, or weak secretor phenotype. You could have number two, sample collection issues, or you could have number three, testing method sensitivity. It could be the sensitivity of the testing method. So let's start with number one, weak secretor phenotype. Some individuals have a version of the FUT2 gene that results in reduced enzyme activity, leading to lower levels of blood type antigens in the bodily fluids. And I think the antigens, where I was reading, the blood type antigens are things that kind of say, okay, this is antigens are like carbohydrates or proteins. From what I can understand, they're like carbohydrates or proteins. Okay, and so um, substances, these are substances that the immune system recognize as foreign or triggers a defensive response against these things. Primarily carbohydrates or proteins. I'm reading too fast. Primarily carbohydrates or proteins found on the surface of red blood cells and can also be present in bodily fluids, specifically the ABO blood groups, antigens A, B, AB, and O. And so that's what we're talking about when we say the antigens. Okay. So some individuals, so going back to number one, the weak secretor phenotype, some individuals have a version of the FUT2 gene that results in reduced enzyme activity, leading to lower levels of blood type antigens, such as those carbohydrates or those proteins in bodily fluids. For example, if JonBenet had a weak secretor phenotype, her saliva might have contained minimal blood type antigens, making detection difficult. Number two, sample collection issues. Improper collecting and proper handling and proper storage of samples can compromise the integrity of the specimen. For example, if JonBenet had consumed a large amount of water before sample collection, the dilution of the saliva could have, now sometimes this is very rare, other factors are more prominent, but if JonBenet had consumed a large amount of water before sample collection, the dilution of her saliva could have affected the concentration of blood type antigens, leading to the inconclusive results. And number three, testing method sensitivity. Some tests may not be sensitive enough to detect this low level of blood type antigens, especially in individuals with weak secretor phenotype. Now, the important issue, and let me get to where I want to be, because I'm digging to the bottom of this. Because if we look over here, we can see that JonBenet, her secretor status is inconclusive. We can see that Burke's secretor status is inconclusive, right? And just to reconfirm, this is coming from CBI's report in 1997, 1996 into 1997, CBI's investigative laboratory report. Okay. But what we see is that John Andrew he's a secretor. We see Melinda, she's a secretor. We see JonBenet, he's a secretor. We see Patsy, she's a secretor. John Fernie, secretor. Priscilla, secretor. Jeff Ramsey, secretor. Mervin's a secretor, but Linda Hoffman, she's a non-secretor. So that means that, it probably wouldn't have shown up for Linda Hoffman. Pew. In anything, it wouldn't have shown up. But for not only for all of JonBenet's family, but the uncle on John's side, right? These are all secretors. It's in. So, Mary Jane Bennett, John Ramsey's mother, or Jay Ramsey, John's I think his name's Dudley J or something like that. I always get mixed up. But anyways, his dad, James, one of them or both of them had to pass on the secretor gene because, like we said, it's in 80% of people. So it's in Jeff and it's in John. And so but when we come to JonBenet, it's inconclusive. When we come to Burke, it's inconclusive. What we can see here is that Burke is alive, JonBenet is dead. So let me keep going on what I'm reading. Secretor status, yes, blood type shows up in fluids. That's what we're talking about. Non-secretor status is no, blood type does not show up in fluids. Inconclusive secretor status means that the test couldn't say for sure because we don't have enough info. Now let's talk about why JonBenét secretor status would be inconclusive. Because JonBenét was deceased, her bodily fluids had already started breaking down by the time they were tested, which means that her saliva may no longer have been enough. Have that her saliva may no longer have had enough intact antigens, blood type markers, things of that nature to give clear results. Sorry, I'm going too fast. The FUT2 gene doesn't stop existing after death, right? But the fluids that carry its work, like saliva, may degrade within hours, especially in a warm environment. For example, if JonBenét was in the wine cellar for over 8 to 12 hours in a potentially humid space, despite it being cold outside, her saliva could have degraded to the point that any markers that she might have secreted weren't detectable anymore. So now we ask, why was Burke Ramsey's secretor status inconclusive? I know I'm being highly technical. I'm sorry, but we got to talk about this. Burke was alive, and his saliva should have been viable for testing. The fact that his test result was inconclusive might mean one of the following. Number one, Burke could be a weak secretor. That means he technically secretes blood markers, but in such small amounts that the test couldn't confirm it. And so this can happen in some children or people with weaker versions of the FUT2 gene. So if JonBenét and Burke both inherited weak secretor alleles, it's plausible that JonBenét had degraded saliva, weak secretion, which gives her inconclusive secretor status. Burke's living saliva plus weak secretion is also inconclusive. And so this would imply a shared genetic profile, possibly inherited from one or both parents, right? So it has to do with genetics and stuff like that. Number two, here's another reason why we might have a problem. Burke's sample was mishandled or diluted. Another possibility is error collection. If his saliva sample was too diluted, for example, Burke drank a lot of water before testing, and from what I can understand, this is kind of rare, or not enough volume, or you don't have enough of the sample, or it's stored improperly, or it's contaminated at the lab. We do have reason to believe that some things may have been contaminated at the lab, because that's one of the reasons why they didn't test the garrote or the toggle rope, is because they said that John Ramsey handled it. In the forensic reports, they said that John Ramsey handled it, but also too, they said that they saw somebody from the Royal something, I think a guy from Canada who was testing it or whatever, said a guy from somewhere. They said he looked like he was working without gloves on. And so basically they said we can't test that because it's for sure going to come back with some issues and consistencies. So those are two things of why it could have been inconclusive for Burke. Just the fact that, the sample could be diluted or mishandled, or he could just in general be a weak secretor. That could be the case. But we walk into some of the strange coincidences that this is only applied to Burke and JonBenét in terms of their secretor status. That's inconclusive. Every adult we have tested has a clear result. JonBenét is dead and Burke is alive. They're the only two ones who have the inconclusive outcome. And they're the only two minors that we know of that are directly in the home the night of the murder. And so when we think about forensic testing, this might run us into like a statistical anomaly. When you have two connected individuals both return inconclusive results while everyone else is conclusive, you might get issues about shared variables like shared genetics. Both possibly weak secretors. They both genetically are just weak secretors. That could be it. Shared handling. The same person is collecting the samples. That's possible. Very possible. And because they share genetics, then sure. Or something else unique to them, like their age, the environment, or maybe even tampering. Okay. So, but I want to move on and touch it and dive a little bit more in on the weak secretor status as it makes sense to me, because I think if I understand it correctly, it goes back to the logic, the genealogy of it, right? So understanding the genetic logic behind the secretor status. Secretor status, as I understand it, is inherited. It's like eye color or your blood type, and it's governed by the FUT2 gene. I could be wrong. If you're a biochemist or whatever this is, feel free to correct me. I don't know this stuff. I'm just trying to research and figure out what everything is. So each person, as I understand it, has 2 copies of this gene, one from each parent. So JonBenet is going to get a FUT2 gene from Patsy, and she's going to get one from John. And same thing with Burke. So if you inherit at least one functioning FUT2 gene, you will likely be a secretor. If you inherit 2 non-functioning copies of this FUT2 gene, you'll be a non-secretor. Okay, so Linda Hoffman Pugh, who is a non-secretor, may have inherited, I think she inherited 2 non-functioning genes, whereas everybody else, and 80% of people in the world, or at least in the US, 80% of people inherited at least one functioning gene to be a secretor. So there's something in between. If you inherit a weaker copy called a SEW, SEW, and as I understand it, and one functioning one, you might be a weak secretor. So like if one parent gives you a weaker FUT2 gene, and then the other one gives you a functional one, then you might be a weak secretor. And so that means you produce some markers, but not enough to test clearly in this case. So again, what we know, John Ramsey, the father of all children, he's a secretor. Patsy Ramsey, biological mother of JonBenet and Burke, she's a secretor. John Ramsey, son from John's first marriage, secretor. Melinda, daughter from John's first marriage, secretor. JonBenet, inconclusive. Burke, inconclusive. Jeff Ramsey, secretor. Okay? The genetic thing that I'm looking at here is that if John is a secretor and he has at least one functioning FUT2 gene, and if Patsy is a secretor and that's the same deal, then that could or should mean to me that their biological children, Burke and JonBenet, would almost certainly have or inherited at least one FUT2 gene, which means that they should either be clearly secretors or possibly weak secretors at worst, but not inconclusive. It should not be inconclusive. And so this is my problem with Burke. Why is yours inconclusive? Right? So we go back to the eye color analogy. If you say like brown eyes, which is a dominant gene, and maybe blue eyes, which are recessive genes, if both parents have brown eyes, then it's highly likely that the child is going to have brown eyes. But even if they pass on the recessive gene, the child would still have some expression of color, and it would be very rare that the child would have a different eye color, say like green or something. As I understand it, you're going to get the brown or blue. For example, my grandmother has blue eyes, but they're dark blue. I don't know how she got them, but my aunt has hazel eyes. I don't know where she got them from. Nobody else in my family has hazel eyes that I know. I might be lying, but nobody that I can think of off top from my dad's side has hazel eyes. And this is my aunt and my grandmother on the paternal side. But my aunt has hazel eyes. She passed that gene directly through to my cousin. He has hazel eyes. And so I'm saying that it's highly unlikely, or it's a little unlikely that those dominant genes together, because you got secretor and secretor, that they're not going to be passed down. So if you have both parents are secretors, they both have functioning FUT2 genes, and both have siblings. John Andrew and Melinda are also secretors, and the uncle, then Burke and JonBenet should statistically be secretors of at least, or at least produce traceable or detectable traces, but they don't. Of course, you can have contaminated or mishandled data, or, you know, because this falls under sample collection error, or it could be intentionally altered. So if there were concerns about matching DNA or bodily fluids at the crime scene, it's not unthinkable that his sample wasn't properly collected when he went up to go, give his hair and blood samples. Or it's possible that you had somebody who wanted to obscure the results. The issue with the weak secretor hypothesis may fall flat is that even if Burke were a weak secretor, the likelihood of both JonBenet and Burke, children of two secretors, both failing and falling into this low producing case is statistically rare, I would think. And the test results, the test result wasn't weak positive, it was inconclusive. And so that means that there wasn't enough of anything to make a determination, which seems like a red flag. So you end up with two kids that don't have a secretor status, whether dead or alive. So my question, why would Burke's secretor status be inconclusive? Given that biological parents are secretors, half siblings and uncles are secretors. Could be he's weak. So the FUT2 gene issue, as we just mentioned, intentional dilution. For example, if Burke drank a large quantity, and this is what I want to get to, if Burke drank a large quantity of water, they know they're going in for DNA testing. If Burke drinks a large quantity of water, for whatever concern that may be the case, and I'm not saying that this is true, I'm just hypothesizing, I'm speculating. If Burke drank a large quantity of water shortly before providing his saliva sample and then swished the water in his mouth, it could, as I understand the research, weaken the tests enough to make his secretor status kind of unreadable. So did somebody basically say, hey, whether they posed it as, hey, when they come up here, just make sure their mouth is clean and make sure that, they swish some water around and make sure they drink a lot of water. I don't know how they would have posed it, but that could have been the case. So it's just like, make sure Burke rinses his mouth before coming. Make sure Patsy rinses her mouth before coming. Just have them drink some water. Make sure John does the same thing. So that would not show up as tampering, right? But it could be enough to render the secretor test inconclusive, especially when you're talking about testing in the 90s. I'm not saying it happened, but with the fact that you have Burke inconclusive, and we know that JonBenet is in a warm environment, and so she's not producing any more saliva like that would carry her antigens, if I'm saying it correctly, if I'm thinking about it correctly. She's not producing any more of the FUT2 gene, and I could be mixing it up, but it wouldn't show up because her body is not producing anymore, right? You don't have a carrier anymore. We get that. But Burke should be continuing to carry. It should not be, and he has his secretor status. He has a history of strong secretor status, so that should show up. That's why I'm having a problem, because it could be the case that we start to try to, if there's a problem with the intruder theory, and I'll get back on track, but if there's a problem with the intruder theory, Or if we have the intruder theory that is solid on this case, but then we start saying, hey, we need, or I guess you could say, if it's not on solid ground or solid footing, and we start testing and saying, okay, we can tell his secretor status through his blood. We don't have any problems. All systems are a go. We don't have any reason to believe that his blood type would cause any problems, in that we cannot see his blood type through his mucus and through his tears and through his saliva. We should see it through all of that. We should be able to use that kind of stuff to test and tell his blood is in there. So say, okay, his blood is on here, his DNA is on here, or whatever. We should not have any problems to be able to tell his DNA. But what we get, because this becomes important, because if we go here and we see that maybe, maybe not, it might show up, and I'm just kind of spitballing here, it might show up in this maybe, maybe not, maybe, maybe not, you know? And again, here, maybe, maybe not. It might show up as that. And so, and even with the pants, even with the long johns, I'm not going to pull it up, but even with the long johns, it might show up as maybe, maybe not. And that is significant, because if you start trying to tamper with or dilute certain parts of what's going on of the examinations, I think you know what I'm getting at. So we know that the shirt, the pants, the blanket, the nightgown, the Barbie nightgown, the comforter, the sheet, another sheet, a blanket, and the toilet tissue. The toilet tissue, guys, was tested. In January of 1998, the CBI tested these and other items, ultimately detecting creatinine on over 30 discrete points. Urine was found not just on clothing, but on bedding and toilet tissue. Urine was found on toilet tissue. Toilet tissue. Toilet tissue. Toilet tissue. Why am I saying that? Because if urine was found on toilet tissue, then that could indicate that JonBenet used toilet tissue. I just want to highlight one thing here. If these are on the ground in JonBenet's bathroom, these pants are on the ground in JonBenet's bathroom, there's urine on toilet tissue, and these are soiled pants, and this is open, then it could indicate maybe that JonBenet used the bathroom on herself during the night, and she got up and changed from these pants and maybe pulled something out of here and wiped herself, to further explain to us that she had a bedwetting accident that night. And so one of those things that Patsy laid out could have happened. And so if Patsy got up and walked around to go check on the whatever, it could have been that JonBenet already used the bathroom. And we don't know what time it was. But anyways, bedding and toilet tissue indicating that urination events likely occur throughout the environment. Urine was found, and I'll just do it like this. I'll just do it like this. Think you can see it. Okay. This is where urine was found. I try to put it together. This is where urine was found. You had a shirt, you had blood on parts A and B, and you had urine on part C. And this was from the 1997 report. This is from the 1998 report. And we're saying if it had both or whatever, and then you had fecal matter. On the pants, no blood, but some urine. And I think this was the long johns. Not both though. You have fecal matter, and because I'm talking about both on any part, like if it's part A on the shirt and part A on over here. But anyways, to try to, try to find some combination of the same thing. Like if it's okay, there's blood on part A of the shirt. Was there also urine on part A of the shirt? That's what I'm trying to get at. Okay, so anyways, when you look at the bloomies, you have blood on these on one part, no urine, no fecal matter, no nothing. Okay, and I might be getting ahead of myself, so I'm gonna hold my comments that I got to say on that. The tape, we know the tape had blood on it. The blanket, one of the blankets had blood on a little piece, but it had urine all over the place. Right? So you have a little bit of blood and a bunch of urine on part A of the blanket. The nightgown, you have blood in very specific places. And we're not talking about a dot of blood. We're talking about blood in very specific places. And you also have urine on the nightgown. What? The comforter, no blood, just urine. The sheet, no blood, just urine. The sheet again, no blood, just urine. You have urine on these sheets. You have a bunch of urine on this blanket. You have another blanket with urine. And then you have toilet tissue with a speck of urine. Guys, come on. Come on. Somebody's playing games. Somebody is playing games with our intelligence. You have urine all over the place, especially on sheets. I want to make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. Okay. So I'm just going to read what I got. Implications of urine detection and contradictions in the testimony. The widespread distribution of creatinine positive results raises important questions about what occurred that night. The presence of urine on the sheets is particularly noteworthy. Both sheets share overlapping locations with urine presence on parts B, D, and F. I didn't even notice that. I did. I think I did. So you got the two sheets, B, B, D, D, F, F. That there's urine on those locations. So that might say that if I'm laying under, okay, you know what? This breaks into two. If I'm laying under two sheets, I'm in bed and I'm laying under two sheets, okay? And you know what? I got one sheet on top and then I got another sheet. So I got this one and I got this one. So I got this sheet on and I lay this sheet on. Okay, I'm asleep. When I use the restroom, if I were to use the restroom in bed, and these are very thin sheets, very thin linen, I'm not going to do it with that. But anyways, and it's thin linen, because I'm not about to wet myself up. There's no reason to be that dramatic or drastic. The water or the liquid, the urine will come through both sheets. In some places, not so much. Maybe this was the bottom sheet. Maybe this was the bottom sheet and maybe this was the top sheet, so that it came through on part B and not C, but it came through on D and not F, not E, but on F. So it went in different places. Okay? That's all I'm saying. So these may be the very sheets Patsy Ramsey referenced during her 1998 interview, when she acknowledged that blankets from JonBenet's bed had been moved, although she attributed some items as having been under JonBenet's pillow, such as the pink pajamas worn on Christmas morning. The forensic presence of urine on sheets indicates that bedwetting may have occurred the night of her death. Now, I didn't want to say this in the last video, but this part about the pink pajamas on that she was wearing on Christmas morning, in the interviews, they asked Patsy, and they showed, I'm not going to pull it up, man. You know what? Cause I wasn't going to do it, cause I don't want to stop so much, but I guess I need to. Okay. Let's see how big I can get this. Okay. So this is JonBenét's bed. It's a little blurry, but this is JonBenét's bed. Okay. It looks weird. This looks very weird because it's just like, why are the covers way back here? Why are the covers way back here? Why is this pillow here? We saw the other pillow in the kitchen, but why is the pillow way back here? If JonBenet was in bed and the intruder came and got her, then wouldn't you just have the covers would be way up here, wouldn't they? And you would just have pulled them back and pulled JonBenet out of the bed. But the covers shouldn't be way back here. That doesn't make sense. And I think right here are the pink pajamas, I believe. Because Patsy said that they were under JonBenet's. They said, hey, there are some pink pajamas under JonBenet's pillow. And Patsy was like, oh, I don't know. They may have been. And then she came back and said, oh, yeah, these are the pink pajamas. If the pink pajamas were under her pillow, how didn't you know where they were? You couldn't find them. They were under her pillow. All right. All right. I choose to believe you, Patsy. I really do. Okay. But anyways, the way the composition of this bed right now and the way the covers are laid looks very unnatural. And that might be because somebody came in, moved the covers back, and instead of undressing the entire bed, because I'm not going to wash the comforter right now, I might just pull the sheets straight up and take them off. And so that might either cause me to pull this bed back a little, this comforter back a little bit more. First of all, I got to move this. Okay. I just need to move this. Second of all, I might pull this back a little bit more with my hands, or I might just, like, by virtue of me pulling the other sheets off, I might do that. Okay. So everybody, so that everybody is on the same page. I just, I want to do this because I don't want to do this all the time, but just so that we're all on the same page. This is from the 1998 interview. This is Patsy talking. They're talking about the likelihood of JonBenet going to bed. So not necessarily it would be a higher likelihood. Tom Haney says, how about, say, Christmas night, had been at the Whites for quite a while, and then she falls asleep and she goes, right. She is put to bed, right? Patsy says, right. Was there a good likelihood that she would have wet the bed that night? And Patsy says, possibly. She may have. Tom says, did anybody take her to the bathroom before putting her to bed? No, she was sound asleep, so she didn't go to bed, but it's possible she could have wet the bed. Tom Haney says, would she have gotten up herself and gone to the bathroom? Patsy says, possibly. Okay, I'm not. Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, so Tom says, okay, you said she was getting better at not wetting, so I'm assuming she's getting better at whatever, and becomes inaudible. And so Tom cuts back and says, taking care of that. Okay, if she got up as a result of that, would she stay up? And Patsy says, not likely. It's not likely that she stay up. She went back to bed. Do you recall if she went to bed on Christmas Eve to Christmas morning? Patsy says no. Or if she wet the bed. Do you recall if she wet the bed on Christmas Eve and into Christmas morning? And Patsy says no, she didn't. Tom says, how about going back from Christmas morning? Do you recall when the last time she wet the bed? Because we talked yesterday about the changing of the linen, the sheets, and we couldn't really pin that down. Patsy says, right. Tom says, okay, but if there were several stains on there and we figured it was around, if the maximum a week since the linen was changed, would that indicate to you wetting more than once? Or Patsy says, well, that was, and she's inaudible. Tom says, right, we're looking at the pillowcase, or we were looking at the pillowcase, but we were also talking about all of the bedding and how often it got laundered. And Patsy says, well, that got changed once a week unless she wet the bed. And then, of course, it would be changed, Okay, so if JonBenet wets the bed, then the bedding is going to be changed. It's going to be laundered. Did you check the bed on Christmas Day that morning? Patsy says yes. And said, okay, but you distinctly remember going and checking on that. Patsy says, plus she had her pink pajamas on that she had put on the night before. If she had wet, it would have been soaking wet, and she wouldn't have had those on Christmas for the Christmas picture. Basically saying, if JonBenet had used the restroom, she had those pink pajamas on Christmas Eve. If she had wet the bed, she would have been soaking wet, and y'all saw me in a picture with my daughter. My daughter would not have been sitting on my lap in no wet pajamas. I'll tell you that. And Tom says, okay, if that's what she, and you say that's what she wore to bed the night before. Patsy says yes. Okay, all right. Did you ever discuss with Dr. Buff? Is that this with Dr. Buff? Is that her pediatrician? Patsy says, not that I remember. Tom says it just wasn't a concern. Patsy said no. Tom says, okay, were the other children her age pretty much potty trained though? And then Patsy says the white children were. Okay, cool. So when we talked about an analysis where JonBenet was wet, the white children were potty trained. So this was not out of the ordinary for you, not unusual. Patsy said no. And you say you don't remember if you discussed it with the doctor. Patsy says, I really don't remember whether or not I did. Okay, so if it's in the medical records, and then Patsy says we would have discussed it. Tom says, okay, do you remember anybody suggesting any remedies, any devices, anything to help train JonBenet on bedwetting? Patsy says, no, I don't consult people about it. If you haven't seen my analysis, or if you have we did some analysis on, I think it was Alan Prendergast from Westword. He has a pretty long article on the JonBenet case. I can't remember it, but he has a pretty Alan Prendergast. He has an article from Westword. He has an article on JonBenet Ramsey. It's pretty long, and in the article, and we discussed it on this channel, but if you just wanted to skip my analysis and go read the article, in that article, if I remember correctly, Priscilla said she gave Patsy, she said that they had moved away from Patsy. They had moved from the rental house, probably 5 minutes down the street from Patsy and John. And they had talked less. They had been talking less. They were still friends, but they had been kind of getting together less just because, we live a little bit of a distance. We're not neighbors anymore. And Priscilla had mentioned in the article, it's quoted in the article as saying, she noticed that JonBenet was getting more into pageants. Patsy had JonBenet in pageants regularly. And Priscilla said she was concerned about that because JonBenet was still wetting the bed. And this is according to the article. JonBenet was still wetting the bed. And so Priscilla was like, man, that's kind of funny. I don't know if you should, you be doing that. And so Priscilla gave Priscilla gave Patsy a book. I think it was called Surviving Ophelia by Dr. Cheryl something. It was called Surviving Ophelia. And so when Patsy says, I ain't talked to anybody about it, then how the heck did Priscilla know about it? How did Priscilla know about it? Because Priscilla said, I thought Patsy was tripping. You got a girl that's 6. My kids are potty trained. I might be able to help you on that tip. And Patsy, all right. No, I didn't consult anybody. I don't talk to anybody about it. Tom says, okay. Patsy says, yeah. And Tom says, did you consult anybody about it? No, I just didn't think it was, I'd gone through big children. They wet the bed. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't. I was not alarmed by it at all, is what Patsy is saying. The big children she's talking about are John and Melinda. I believe she's talking about John and Melinda because John said his kids wet the bed clear up to, 8, 9, something like that. 7, 8, 9, something like that. Burke's age, I think John said was the exact language. Said Burke's age, and Burke was like 10. It was like, well, what? Up to 10. All right. So it wasn't something that you might seek advice about. And then Patsy said no, and said, and if you did, who would you have talked to? And Patsy said, I don't think I talked to anybody. Man, buckling down, doubling down. She is doubling. That's the word. That's what I'm looking for. She is doubling down. I ain't talked to anyone. Nope. I wouldn't have talked to anybody because I don't do that stuff. You wouldn't have talked to your best friend about it, who has kids the same age as you. Mm-mm. Okay. If you had, if I had thought it was a problem, I probably would have talked to her doctor about it, and I can't remember talking to him about it. So, and Tom says, okay, and say, I don't think it was a problem. Patsy said, I don't think it was a problem. And Tom is like, you didn't consider it a problem? She said, no. She said, okay, do you recall, like I say, discussing it with anybody? And she said, I just don't remember discussing it with anybody. Okay, do you recall talking to anybody about this kind of source of frustration or a little problem, this bedwetting? Patsy says, it just didn't seem, and I can understand her getting mad at this because he's asking the same question. And she says, it just didn't seem like a problem to me. I've had problems. I had cancer. That's a problem. It didn't seem to be a problem. So I can't really say that it was on my mind to discuss with anybody. Tom says, okay, but it doesn't have to be a problem to discuss something with somebody, right? Patsy says, I don't remember ever discussing it with anybody, including her doctor. Tom says, okay, so, if she wet the bed, if she had an incident, and this is Patsy. Patsy says, so, if she wet the bed, if she had an incident, I take the sheets off, throw them in the laundry, que sera, sera. Really? Oh, oh, I guess that's why the bed would look like this. Because this may be, and I can't remember the name of the sheet, but it's like a sheet that it has the I call it the scrunchy sides, and you fold it under. I got the thing in there. I'm not going to go get it, but you fold it under, and it sort of grips the bed. I can't remember what the sheet is called. There's a specific name for it. Tell me in the chat if you know it, if you remember it. But anyways, this looks like what that sheet is, but it looks like the white linen sheets or the linen sheets that would have been on there are gone. Like somebody pulled them up, maybe indicating that if JonBenet would have used the restroom that night, and I'm going to talk about why I believe she may have, and what's connected to that later on in my analysis this week, what have you, if those sheets would have been pulled off and been thrown in the laundry or about to be thrown in the laundry. Now, man, photographs of the bed show it is disheveled, like we're just looking at, in a disheveled state, inconsistent with someone being tucked in. This observation supports the idea that the sheets were pulled off either during a panic response to an accident or in the course of staging, possibly. Notably, Patsy also commented on soiled pants from the bathroom found on the bathroom floor, saying they appeared to have fecal matter, yet no fecal matter was indicated on the pants in the lab reports. Instead, urobilinogen, a marker of fecal matter, was only found on Exhibit 18U, which was the comforter. This discrepancy raises questions about Patsy's perception or potential overjustification during the interview. Talking about these pants. And I don't know what picture they showed her, but if it was this picture, she has pretty good eyesight. But this is what they were talking about. I just want to go back here for a second just to kind of double check myself. So I want to go back and pull up the transcripts and kind of make sure I'm good. I just wanted to double check this part. So I want to double check Patsy commenting about soiled pants on the bathroom floor, saying they appeared to have fecal matter. Um, Going back and double checking that in the transcripts, I don't see that. What I do see, and I had the time to highlight a bunch of stuff actually. Um, all right, so let's go to the 90. Let's start at 1997. Yeah, for Patsy. Let's start at 1997. Think I have some looks in 1997. Okay, back more. Let's go to page. Yeah, we're already here. And so this is kind of what she said. Patsy says, if I didn't just take her to potty before bedtime, she very likely would have wet the bed. Steve Thomas asking about that a little bit. Okay, do you have any idea about how long this has been going on for? Any time that she had broken it and come back to having bedwetting problems? Basically, did she have bedwetting problems, stopped having bedwetting problems, and then came back and started having bedwetting problems again? And so Patsy says, no, I put her in pull-ups until very recently, and I took her off, and I thought, maybe it might be better. And this was a weird statement to me. I'm not going to lie to you. This was kind of a weird statement to me. She said, I put her in pull-ups, took her off of the pull-ups because those things are so absorbent. So this is kind of your problem, that it's solving your problem. That, you can't, the child can't feel if they're wet or not. So I thought, well, it might just be better if she felt uh, than being. And so basically, yeah, but she's had a lot of dry nights, but she would be wet probably once a week. So why would it be better for her to feel that she's wet unless you're trying to, maybe teach her a lesson? Because this could stem the irritation, because you can't even feel you're wet. It could stem the irritation. Now, unless I'm maybe tripping, why would you want her to feel like she's wet unless you're trying to basically say, okay, hey, you don't want to do this, and try to instill some sort of subconscious, reinforcement to kind of help her not to do that. Maybe she notices that she's getting itchy at night. I don't know. Not I haven't potty trained kids, so I wouldn't know. But basically, um, Tom Trujillo asks, when she wet the bed, would she come up and tell you guys, or would she just crawl into the other bed, crawl into Burke's spare bed? What was the routine if she actually wet the bed? Patsy says, well, sometimes she'd get up and go into other bed. Sometimes she really wouldn't wake up until morning, when she normally would wake up, and maybe she'd change her nightgown or something, and I'd find her pajamas in the bathroom floors. So that's the point I want to grab. First of all, she's in her nightgown. The normal thing, the normal routine is that she's in her nightgown. Mm-hmm. See, that's why Patsy shouldn't be talking. Sometimes you say things, right? And you know what I mean? Sometimes you say things that you shouldn't be saying. She's in her nightgown. I find things in her pajamas on the bathroom floor. So it's quite routine to find her pajamas on the bathroom floor. I think I'm going to 109 here. So Tom, he says, okay, when JonBenet would wet the bed weekly, who took care of her sheets? Is that something Linda would take care of? How often, I guess, would who would even clean the sheets, to be more specific? And Patsy says, well, she normally changed the beds weekly, but typically it the as seen as, I Linda didn't come until 9 o'clock. So Patsy's talking, she gets herself together and she says, Linda didn't come until 9 o'clock, but typically I would strip the bed, put them in the washer or something. So a lot of times this is going to be Patsy's job. Patsy is going to check for this. So we have reason to believe to put Patsy in this area. I think that is all of my notes for 1997, transitioning over into 1998. Yeah. And so I want to go to, yes, we've done those. I want to go to page 197. Okay. Talking more about the nightgown and to kind of understand a little bit more about the nightgown. So here, um, Trip Demuth says, which drawer? Looking at the photo 18, Patsy Ramsey said, this is in her bathroom, her sink. Which drawer would the Barbie doll nightgown have been in? Been kept in? And Patsy said, probably that one or the one below it. And then Trip, just to clarify, I appreciate him doing this. Trip, just to clarify, says the one that is open or below it right there in photo 18. And Patsy says, uh-huh. Okay. So basically, when Patsy said, I was going and looking for the Barbie nightgown, it's supposed to be in the open drawer. When I'm going and looking for the Barbie nightgown, it's supposed to be in this drawer or the one below it. So if we look over here, we see this drawer and we see there's one below it. So we see bop, bop, bop. So there are three on each side. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So Patsy is saying, when I looked in here, I was looking and I was digging for it. I couldn't find it. Apparently somewhere in here, there's supposed to be some sort of stepping stool. There's also supposed to be some sort of nightlight or some sort of lamp that you can leave on in here, as it's talked about in the transcripts that JonBenet can use to step on the stepping stool and brush her teeth and have the night lamp in here. So if she gets up at nighttime, she can use the restroom without bumping into things. I think according to Patsy. But anyways, talking about in here. So if we were looking for the Barbie nightgown, that's where it should have been, right? And so that makes sense. Okay, 98. Now going on to page 219. Because you wonder, okay, if it's not supposed to be in the wine cellar, where is it supposed to be? It's supposed to be in a very easy place to find. Shouldn't be hard to find. Okay. And they jumped into, so they closed the tape off and they jumped into the next day on June 25th. Patsy's taking some medicine before she's come in. She's taking some antidepressant stuff. The night before, she took 10 milligrams of Prozac, took some pain medicine, Excedrin. Then she woke up in the morning because they're there at 9:20. So she woke up prior to that and took 20 milligrams of Prozac and a half a milligram of Ativan. And we know that when Dr. Buff came over, he gave her Valium. So Patsy says she's doing fine. No issues. Okay. Let me make sure I'm in the right place, because I think this is going to be in a really weird place. Or it might be up here. Yeah. Talking about um yeah, this little area is talking about, when I was reading over it, this little area was talking about basically the Christmas schedule for Linda Hoffman Pugh. Basically, Linda would come Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Um she came Monday and I think she helped Patsy plan a party. But she didn't come Wednesday, obviously, because Wednesday was Christmas. And so she would have missed Thursday and she would have come on Friday when the Ramseys were out of town. And so I don't know why Patsy's throwing the shade. She didn't come Wednesday because it was Christmas. She was going to come Friday after we had gone. I left her a check because she cried she wanted money. It's like, why do you got to say that stuff about people? Like you're trying to make people seem like they're just like these peasants that have to beg you for money. She wouldn't be crying about money, dude. Like that's her money. You owe her money. All right. But anyways, Tom Haney says, but if she comes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and obviously doesn't come because of Christmas on Wednesday, we have the sheets on at a minimum Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So 3 days, basically, because talking about the sheets being changed weekly, unless, you know, they get wet. And Patsy Ramsey says probably. And so the maximum number going back maybe next Friday or last Wednesday. Right. And so Tripp says, did JonBenet ever have nose bleeds at night? And Patsy Ramsey said, not that I remember. Sometimes she might pick her nose, maybe because it to bleed, but she wouldn't have one of those, dry, you know, told her to hold her head back kind of thing. So she wouldn't have one of those runny nosebleeds. And so, and this is where they close it off. Um, if I remember correctly, he's asking that question because I think because of this part. Now I don't know what blanket this is, but in the 1997 interview, or I'm sorry, in the 1997 CBI analysis, they found like a speck of blood on a blanket. Now I don't know if that blanket was her favorite blanket. I don't know what it was, but he might be asking that because of that speck of blood. And if it's that blanket, then they also found a bunch of urine on that blanket. And so they found that speck of blood. So basically, he's trying to make sense of things. And he said, did she have nosebleeds? Maybe she had like a little bit of nosebleed. That's the only thing that kind of makes sense to me. Why I would think that he would ask that question. Okay. I think the next one is page 233. And I actually helped myself out here. Um, Tom Haney says, how about 378? They're looking at pictures again. Patsy says, this is JonBenet's floor, her pants. Tom Haney says, do you recall those particular pants? When would she have worn those last? And Patsy Ramsey says, not for sure. Not sure. Now, again, we're talking about these pants. And Patsy is saying, I'm not sure when JonBenet would have worn those pants last. Because what people, I think, fail to realize just how important these questions are. When you center around, when you start pulling everything together, I think people really don't understand just how important these questions are. These questions are central to the case. Why? Because we are talking about the possibility that JonBenet actually got up at nighttime, and it is helping us understand a little bit more about whether or not JonBenet got up at night. What do I mean? If those pants were not there earlier on in the day, and then they just happened to be there later on, those pants would not be there unless JonBenet used the restroom on herself and took them off and dropped them there. Now, if Patsy is saying no, if we were to say, and Patsy is saying no, Patsy, did JonBenet use the restroom on herself and drop the pants earlier on in the day? And then Patsy says no, she doesn't typically do that during the day. Then maybe she typically does it during nighttime. You see what I'm saying? And so that means if we got urine on the sheets, if we got urine on and her typical thing is to do this, you got urine on these pants laid on the floor, then that means JonBenet probably got up and used the restroom. So anyways, do you recall those particular pants? She would have worn those last, not for sure, probably recently, because they are dropped in the middle of the floor, but I don't remember exactly. So JonBenet is probably recently wearing those pants. They are kind of inside out, right? Patsy says, right. 379 is an up close of this same picture. It appears they are stained. Patsy says, right. Is this something that JonBenet had a problem with? And then Patsy says, well, she was at an age where she was learning to wipe herself, and sometimes she wouldn't do such a great job. Tom Haney says, did she have accidents, if you will, in the course of the day or the night as opposed to just bedwetting? And then so Patsy says, no, not usually. No, that would probably be more from just not wiping real well. And so Tom Haney says, okay, do you know how long those would have been in that position in 378 on the floor in there. Patsy says it depends if she wore them when she wore them last. And so Tom Haney says again, do you recall? And then Patsy says, I don't remember. And then so Tom says, and we're clarifying. Tom says, on Christmas Day, were you in that bathroom at all? And Patsy says, very likely, but I can't say for sure. Had you been in there that day? Tom Haney asks. And so, and would you, had you been in there that day, would you have done something with them? So basically, if you had been there, you see, you said it's likely. Would you have done anything with them? And says Patsy, and so Patsy says, um, well, I got, that night, I got, I know I got the long johns for her out of that bathroom. And Tom Haney says, right, out of one of the drawers in there. She says, yeah. Do you recall seeing those on the floor that night when you got those long johns? Sorry. And Patsy says, no. And so Patsy goes on to say they could be there. They could have been there. I don't know. So it's just like, okay, to get a better view. And so um, Tom says, because right out of one of the drawers, Patsy says, yeah, do you recall seeing those on the floor that night when you got these? She says, no, I don't recall seeing them when you got the underwear. And Patsy said they could have been there. I don't know. And he said, could have? She said, could have been there. Yes, don't know for sure. Is it possible at some point during the night that she could have gotten up and put those on or thrown them down there or changed in some way, trying to account for those being there? And Patsy says, I can't imagine that. No, because I put those, she was zonked out asleep. So I put her to bed and she had those. She had worn the black velvet ones to Priscilla, what she had on early in the day. I just can't remember. It might have been those. I just can't remember. Could have taken those off, gotten the dress to go to Priscilla's and then left them there. And so Tom says, when she was out riding her bike, do you remember? Think back, looking back at when what she was wearing. Patsy says, can't remember. Um, and so anyways, like we're locking Patsy down into a narrative that the forensic evidence explains. And so I want to go to two, I might hold off on that one. Okay, let me go to, yeah, okay. I think I may have to go back to 97. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think I forgot to mention this. So in 1997, they're asking Patsy, it says, okay, Nidra talked about JonBenét's pageant nightgown a little bit. And then Patsy says, her what? And then Steve Thomas says, may have described this as her Barbie nightgown or her traveling pageant nightgown. And Patsy said she had a Barbie nightgown, but I don't know if we had a specific pageant nightgown. And then Thomas says, Tom Trujillo says, was that special to her in any way, or just a nightgown like all of the other nightgowns? And then Patsy Ramsey says, well, she had this little kind of genie kind of little ink. And then Steve Thomas says, maybe that's it. And then Patsy says, that might be what it was. Genie Barbie, it was this little, grandma got it for her. It was like pants, like nylon kind of stuff, just little, white piece or whatever. And Thomas comes back, Tom Trujillo comes back and says, okay, maybe that's what Nidra was talking about. Patsy says, it might be what she was talking about. But then there is another piece that is key. And to be honest with you, it kind of flies in the face of what John and Patsy said about JonBenet being woken up at nighttime. Before I got to this next statement, I wanted to read this one. So this is from the 98 interview from John Ramsey. And he says they're talking about the pineapple. And John Ramsey says, I can't imagine that somebody could have gotten her up and fed her pineapple. She would have screamed bloody murder. Okay. Okay. And another part, um, John Ramsey says, I can see why, this question, where did it come from? Talking about the pineapple. But I don't think, other than the fact that there's this bowl on the table, which I can't, Patsy needs to look at it to answer that question, but I don't. It's very significant if the intruder somehow, well, that just doesn't make sense. I mean, JonBenet was a smart, strong little girl. And if she had the opportunity to scream and to kick and fight, she would have done that. No question in my mind. So I don't buy that. An intruder sat her down and fed her pineapple. Well, we're not trying to get you to buy anything. We're just trying to get you to tell us what happened in the house. John goes on to say, same interview. I said, I didn't feed her pineapple. I didn't feed her pineapple. I know Patsy didn't feed her pineapple because she said she didn't. And I was going on track of there is no way of a strange intruder could have gotten her down there without her screaming, kicking, and hollering and fed her pineapple. But you asked, I think, what if it was someone she knew, and that's conceivable. And then Lou said, how would you explain it? And Ramsey said, well, at the risk of just, unfortunately, after this case already jumping to the conclusion, there was apparently one of JonBenet's friends or parents that day said JonBenet told them that Santa Claus was going to come and visit her that night, last night, not the night. I don't remember, or I don't know if that's hearsay on my part. Lou said, where did you hear that from? And John Ramsey said, I think I heard it from our investigator, I think. Lou Smith says, okay. And John says, okay, so if that's true, which we don't, that's unsubstantiated. Okay. See, we're going off on wild tangents. Okay, so if that's true, and if the Santa Claus were somebody she knew, she adored Santa Claus, they had a special relationship. If he was the one came into her room as previously promised, she wouldn't have been alarmed. She would have gone downstairs with him, gone wherever he wanted. I don't know why he would have sat her down and fed her pineapple, but it's possible. No, it's not. And now we're looking at JonBenet's behavior with somebody that she wouldn't know and somebody that she would know. So if she knew him, she probably wouldn't put up a fight. But if she didn't know him, she probably would have put up a fight. Patsy, when they asked Patsy about it, Patsy said she didn't know what JonBenet would do. She's not confident at all in what JonBenet would do. Said, let me ask you a question. This is hypothetical, but where JonBenet to have been awakened by a stranger intruder, is it your belief as a mother that she would have been more paralyzed by fear, or would she have fought and kicked and screamed and yelled? Now, John just told us that he believes JonBenet would have fought, screamed, yelled, kicked, done all of that. Okay. But then Nidra comes in and says, Steve Thomas says, Nidra suggested to me that when she might take her to the bathroom at night to prevent a bedwetting occurrence. Now, see, you know what grandma's going to do. What mama won't do sometimes, grandma will do. Say mama might, not know, or mama might handle the baby with, mama might handle the baby. And I'll go ahead and say this last thing and close it out. And if I need to do a part two on this, I'll do a part two. But, oh, yeah, that's what I should do. I'll finish up with John. On 293. Or no, I think it's Patsy on 293. That's who it is. Patsy on 293. And so they were talking about soiling, JonBenet soiling her pants and how that works out. And so Patsy Ramsey says, Well, she would, like we talked about earlier, um, wiping habits weren't terrific. And so, and in previous videos, we've talked about vaginitis, right? We talked about that. So, um, that's what they're talking about, infections and stuff like that. So Patsy said, well, she would, like we talked about earlier, her wiping habits weren't terrific. And so she had urinated. Maybe she wouldn't wipe properly, and her underwear would get wet, a little damp, which would cause a little irritation, kind of like a diaper rash. And the same with, bowel movements, so I would use a lot of time, I would use Desitin or something. She had some redness, so I used Desitin. And what's interesting about that is that Patsy said she removed the the pull up. I don't know why she did that. She used the pull up. She removed it. So it seems as if the redness and the irritation and the infections probably started to ramp up after that, because JonBenet was, you can't remove the pull up and just be like, okay, hey, here, hope you learned your lesson. That, you can't do that. So it seems like that's what Patsy tried to do, and it didn't work. Um, it didn't work. And so, kind of getting back to this, I have several other things about this that I want to touch on, but I'll do those in part two to kind of bring this all together. But I wanted to get to the part, I wanted to kind of clarify this part, in that not only are we talking about an involvement of urine, but the possibility that JonBenet may have accidentally had a bowel movement on the comforter just a little bit. And I don't know if it was that night or if it was later, but this is a new level. Um, this girl she really had problems uh, with her toilet training. And I think this is more serious, I think, than Patsy is trying to let on. It's one thing for us to find urine on the covers, but if you're telling me that the covers are washed once a week, and what should have been done on a Monday, what should have been done on a Monday, how did that poop get there? I guess that's all I'm. How did the poop get there? That's what's killing me. You know what I mean? Because it was just one spot that may indicate that a little bit came out somehow, some way. A little bit came out, and maybe it was there from the week before or something like that. Maybe it was in a place that somebody just didn't see it. Um, but the forensic tests certainly picked it up. But it really does present a problem in terms of neglect. When we start talking about neglect, and you had your daughter under a remedy, and the remedy, the problem was not fully remedied. And so you removed the only remedy you had before JonBenet's problem was completely taken care of. And so you now make her sit in her own waste. You now make her lay in her own bed and just take it. And it's now her responsibility to get up and handle her business, because if she doesn't, she's just going to lay in it till morning. And JonBenet is like, if you're teaching me that this behavior is okay, because I'm asleep, and if I don't feel it, I don't feel it. But you got to just, the fact that she's laying in that stuff till morning time and itching and getting redness, that would hurt me, because it's just like, I don't want my baby to be sitting in no redness. You know what I mean? Like, and with irritated skin and all such as that, that would hurt me. So I'll be honest, man. That seems like, and then for them to ask John about it, and John was like, "Oh, Patsy deals with that stuff." Yeah, but that's your daughter, man. If she's a daddy's girl and that's your baby, why would you not care about that? But anyways, I'll touch on more of this on next video. We'll kind of keep digging, and like I said, appreciate your love and support. Continue to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, take it easy.